This is the national programme from London, radiated by the new longwave transmitter at Droitwich, working on a wavelength of 1,500 metres.
Broadcasting on Radio 4 Longwave finally closes this weekend. We're marking the end of an era. Sailing by and the shipping forecast were a fixture of Radio 4 Longwave for decades, as were Test Match Special, Yesterday in Parliament and the Daily Service. All have moved to other homes on BBC Radio in recent years, and this Saturday, June the 27th, the BBC Longwave network finally closes.
Yes, the 3 transmitter stations at Droitwich in Worcestershire and Westerglen and Berghead in Scotland will all cease operations.
That's all we have time for, but please keep your questions and comments coming in to more or less at BBC.
You're listening to BBC Radio 4 on 198 kHz longwave. This service is closing. BBC transmissions on this frequency will end on the 27th of June this year. However, you can continue to listen in many other ways. You can find BBC Radio 4 online via BBC Sounds. Radio 4 is available on DAB, digital radio, and through your digital television, including Freely. Radio 4 is also available via FM radio on 92 to 95 MHz and 103 to 105 MHz. Plus, you can listen via your smart speaker. Just say, play Radio 4. Information on how to listen can be found on the BBC website at bbc.co.uk/reception.
Oh, a hat-trick of heat records as the hottest day in June is reset for the 3rd consecutive. BBC says the transmitter technology is ageing and increasingly costly to maintain. Arqiva, who operates the transmitter, said it had a shared history with the BBC and that it had been an honour to maintain the long-wave transmitters on their behalf. Well, Gabriel O'Regan takes a look back at the history of longwave at the BBC.
This is BBC Radio 4, serving the whole of the United Kingdom on 1,500 metres, 200 kHz. November 1978, the moment Radio 4 arrived on longwave, and with it a new UK theme to mark the occasion. After almost 50 years on the frequency, and over a century since the BBC first broadcast on longwave,
the BBC will end broadcasts of Radio 4 on longwave later this year.
1 o'clock tomorrow morning will mark the end of Radio 4's longwave service. The Daventry transmitter, which opened in July 1925, was the world's first permanent high-powered long-wave transmitting station, a single aerial on a hill, but enough to reach 94% of the population. Libby Purvis presented on Radio 4 for more than 40 years, but her love of radio started long before that.
A little transistor radio was like the mobile phone is for children today, and I longed for nothing more than this extraordinary magic thing in my shorts pocket, people just talking to me out of this tiny box I could carry around with me.
By 1934, the Daventry transmitter was replaced by a far more powerful one at Droitwich in Worcestershire.
This is Droitwich testing on a wavelength of 15.
I'm Tim Lee. I've been a Radio 4 announcer and newsreader for nearly 30 years. I was lucky enough to visit the Droitwich transmitting site. And when you stand at the bottom of the mast, the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. And it's not because of the excitement, it's not because I was being an anorak, it was because there's so much RF energy floating around there that you can actually feel it.
Ici, non. Les Français parlent au français.
During the Second World War, BBC transmitters, including the long-wave signals from Droitwich, carried coded messages to the French resistance, the powerful waves able to penetrate deep into occupied territory. After the war, BBC Longwave carried the Light programme, then Radio 2, and finally, in 1978, Radio 4.
Welcome. We're glad you found us. And welcome to our new listeners in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland. And welcome to our new friends who may be listening across the English Channel. Welcome, gentlemen sailing the high seas.
The shipping forecast came with it, but not because it belonged to Radio 4, but because it belonged to longwave. It was the only signal that could reach sailors at sea.
And now the shipping forecast is issued by the Met Office.
This is Peter Jefferson. I used to read the shipping forecast on Radio 4. Being on longwave, you had the clarity aspect as well, knowing that whoever was listening, maybe quite possibly at sea, was not listening under ideal circumstances, so you had to make sure that your diction and pronunciation was as clear as possible.
Good morning from John Timpson and Libby Purvis. I have been a radio professional, but I've also been a radio listener, and a very dependent radio listener when sailing in small boats around our coasts. There was something about the absolute calm, professional accuracy. No silly little disc jockey jokes or raised eyebrows or little additions. No, just the forecast.
That's the end of this shipping bulletin.
Longwave was also the home of Test Match Special. Well, it was eventually.
When Test Match Special came to Radio 4 Longwave, it was feeling a bit unloved, and they weren't made particularly welcome by Radio 4. I'm Andy Rushton, and I was for a long time the announcer for Test Match Special on Radio 4 Longwave. You were well aware of the Longwave audience because they were very quick to get in touch, some of whom were very annoyed at having their days of listening to Radio 4 interrupted by cricket.
The shipping forecast has actually rather stymied us, and you know that the game is going to end or whatever it may be during the shipping forecast. What do? There are millions of people listening, and off they go to learn all about Rockall. But we'll miss it. We'll miss the shipping forecast.
And it wasn't just cricket or weather. For decades, 198 kHz longwave was the daily heartbeat of institutional Britain.
Here on Longwave, it's time for the daily service.
And the steady churn of democracy.
But here on Radio 4 Longwave, it's time for Yesterday in Parliament.
Gradually, though, the programmes, traditions, quirks, and relevance of a network and wavelength steeped in history have faded away. The UK theme, composed to welcome Radio 4 to Longwave, was dropped in 2006.
Which of course means that now we've come to a rather an historic moment. We're about to hear for the very last time live here on BBC Radio 4, the UK theme.
In 2023, Test Match Special left the frequency. In 2024, the longwave shipping forecast came to an end, and one of those forecasts would dip out of PM just before the news.
And for the very final time, that's where we leave PM here on BBC Radio 4, 198 Longwave.
Since then, Radio 4 Longwave has been a simulcast of the Radio 4 FM schedule. Until tomorrow.
Longwave radio is an old plough horse which is off to the knackers. We can't change that, but it creates a moment of nostalgia and a moment of gratitude as well.
Gabriel O'Regan on the truly momentous end of Longwave.
For broadcasts on Longwave will end in just over half an hour's time. The BBC began broadcasting on the frequency from its original transmitters in Daventry in Northamptonshire in 1925, before switching to a new transmitting station in Worcestershire. Our media correspondent David Sillitoe reports.
Ready for number 3. All ready. Right, let her go.
1934, the beginning of an engineering marvel.
Stand by to run up the high-tension machine.
The powerful long-wave transmitter masts at Droitwich, 213 metres high, along with 2 sister stations in Berghead and Westerglen in Scotland, ensured the BBC was a truly national service.
This is the national programme from London, radiated by the new long-wave transmitter at Droitwich.
Beginning with Eric Coates' The Merrymakers, the BBC's new Droitwich service sent out a signal that travelled far out to sea and, for decades, delivered the shipping forecast.
Dover, Thames, Humber, Heligoland, East Dogger.
And that ability to travel far? In the Second World War, the long-wave signal was a way of communicating across Europe.
These are today's main events. Germany has invaded Poland and has bombed many towns.
And even sending coded messages to the French resistance. And in more recent years,
on 198 Longwave,
allowed cricket-starved holidaymakers to follow Test Match Special
in the West Indies
from the beaches of Brittany.
And join Jonathan Agnew.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to...
But 92 years on, the masts are showing their age. The elderly technology behind the service is drifting into obsolescence. Scan along Longwave these days, and most will only hear the slightly scratchy sound.
I just wonder if there's anyone at the top of
BBC Radio 4 on 198.
actually batting for Radio 4.
Which has been warning its few remaining listeners that things are coming to an end.
This service is closing. BBC transmissions on this frequency will end on
15 years after the announcement that investment in the service had come to an end, Arqiva, who operate the transmitters, are shutting it down next week, which means that tonight Radio 4 will be saying goodbye to Longwave.
A few moments here on Radio 4, the shipping forecast. This is BBC Radio 4. Now, the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office on behalf of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency at 0015 on Saturday, the 27th of June, 2026. The general synopsis at 1800. Low Malin, 1008. Expected Bailey, 993 by 1800 Saturday. New high. And Shetland Isles, east 3 or 4, veering south, southeast 4 or 5. Occasional rain and fog patches, showers later, moderate or good, occasionally very poor. And that completes the shipping forecast. Well, before we leave you tonight, I just wanted to take a moment to mark the end of an era. For almost a century, the longwave transmitters have carried the BBC across the airwaves, from the iconic Droitwich transmitting station in Worcestershire to Westerglen and Birkhead in Scotland. Although the longwave signal is fading into history this morning, the memories and the connection it created will endure forever. We shall miss your warmth and crackle. Well, that's it from me, Al Ryan, and all of us here at Broadcasting House. If you have been, thanks for listening. Have a safe, quiet, and peaceful night. Good night. Ihawa.
You are listening to 198 kHz longwave. BBC Radio 4 is no longer available on this frequency. However, you can find Radio 4 many other ways. You can find BBC Radio 4 online via BBC Sounds. Radio 4 is available on DAB digital radio and through your digital television, including Freely. Radio 4 is also available via FM radio on 92 to 95 MHz and 103 to 105 MHz. Plus, you can listen via your smart speaker. Just say, play Radio 4. Information on how to listen can be found on the BBC website at bbc.co.uk /reception. You are listening to 198 kilohertz longwave. BBC Radio 4 is no longer available on this frequency. However, you can...